And we have some, I have a source sheet that if anyone wants it later in English, I can send it to you as well. And once I open the source sheet, I can't see everyone. So if you have a question, comments, either speak up or raise a virtual hand or something, because I can't see everybody's face when the sources are open. Okay. Some of the sources I had to translate myself, so they're not really academic translation. They're not for publication. Okay, so we want to see some of the sources that talk about serving in the army and in general the value of life. It's very relevant to what's happening today in Israel, but it's not only. So the two main biblical sources that we have to take into account are the one about the tribes of Reuben and Gad, and then another one from the Deuteronomy. This is in the context of when the Israelites were in the desert and they had to cross over into the west bank of the Jordan, and the tribes of Reuben and Gad, and in other sources it includes half the tribe of Menashe also, they wanted to stay on the eastern bank of the Jordan. So the Bible tells us that the Reubenites and the Gadites own cattle in very large number, and they say, it would be a favor to us if this land were given to your servants as a holding. Do not move us across the Jordan. They tell Moses they want to stay on the other side of the Jordan. And Moses replies to the Gadites and to the Reubenites, are your brothers to go to war while you stay here? This is a phrase that you will hear a lot in Israel nowadays. How can you even suggest that you stay, stay studying or whatever, and the rest of them should go and fight for you? So there's a big chapter, a long chapter, where these two tribes say, no, we will also go and fight, and then we'll come back. And once they explain that, then Moses said to them, if you do this, if you go to battle as shock troops at the instance of the Lord, and every shock fighter amongst you crosses the Jordan at the instance of the Lord, until he has dispossessed his enemies before him, and the land has been subdued at the instance of the Lord, and then you return only after you've gone with the rest of the tribes across the Jordan and conquered the land, then you will return to the eastern bank of the Jordan. Then you shall be cleared before the Lord and before Israel, and this land shall be your holding under the Lord. But if you do not do so, that is, if you do not go and fight with the rest of the tribes, you will have sinned against the Lord, and know that your sin will overtake you. So this is like the typical verse that everybody quotes when they say, nobody has a right to say, I have a good reason not to fight. Everybody else should go and fight, and I will, stay in my yeshiva and study, and that's what's going to be my part during the war. However, there is another section in the book of Deuteronomy where it talks about people who are exempt from war. And it says, then the officials will address the troops as follows. Is there anyone who has built a new house but has not dedicated it? Let him go back to his home, lest he died in battle and another man dedicate it. Is there anyone who has planted a vineyard but has never harvested it? Let him go back to his home, let he die in the battle and another man harvest it. Is there anyone who has paid the bride price for a wife but who has not yet married her? Let him go back to his home, let he die in a battle and another man marry her. The official shall go on addressing the troops and say, is there anyone afraid and disheartened? In Hebrew, it's much stronger because it says like his heart melts. He can't stand this, the war. He can't be in that situation. Let him go back to his home, lest his brother's heart melt like his. So there are a series of exceptions in this section of the book of Deuteronomy, where you see that certain people can go back and not go into war. But we'll see, since we're not a religion of of the written Bible, but according to how the rabbis interpreted it in the oral law, then we'll see how the rabbis interpreted this when this applies. According to the literal meaning, it would seem that there just are certain exceptions. When we go on to the Mishnah, we already see that these exceptions are limited to certain circumstances. And it says, when do these exemptions apply? In a milchemet reshut, in an elective war. But in a milchemet mitzvah, in a mandatory war, everyone goes out, even the groom from his chamber and the bride from her wedding canopy. So the rabbis already understood that you can't, in a very extreme circumstances, we'll see in a minute what a milchemet mitzvah and a milchemet reshut are specifically, but when it's considered an obligatory war, a mandatory war, you can't apply these exceptions that because he got married or he planted a vineyard or and so on, he can avoid going to war. Maimonides in Mishneh Torah, which is a code of law from the 12th century, explains to us regarding these exceptions what would be a milchemet mitzvah and what would be a milchemet reshut, and when the exceptions would apply. And he talks about the king, who is then the person, according to the Bible, is the person who takes the people out to war. In our times, it would be replaced maybe by a government, an army, or etc. But in those times, it was the king together with the Sanhedrin who decided when they go to war or not. So he says, a king should not wage other wars before a milchemet mitzvah. And what is considered a milchemet mitzvah? The war against the 7 nations of Canaan. And I wrote on the bottom of the page, it's the list of that appears in Deuteronomy. It's the Hittite, and the Girgashite, and the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. All of these people don't exist anymore. These were the 7 peoples that were living in the land of Canaan before the Israelites conquered it. So removing them from the land so that the people of Israel could live there was a milchemet mitzvah, was a mandatory war. So the war against the 7 nations and the war against Amalek, if you recall, Amalek is the people who fought against the Israelites from behind and took advantage of the stragglers and of the of the weak people, and they became an example of those enemies that we should destroy completely. So that would be the second group, or the second kind of war that could be considered a milchemet mitzvah. And the third kind is a war fought to assist Israel from an enemy which attacks them. That would apply to wars up to our days, right? When some enemy comes and wants to attack us and wants to destroy us, and we have to defend ourselves, then these all would be examples of milchemet mitzvah, as opposed to a milchemet reshut. Afterwards, after the king has completed the milchemet mitzvah, he may wage a milchemet reshut. What is that? A war fought with other nations in order to expand the borders of Israel or magnified its greatness and reputation. That means that's a war that it's not the very existence of the people that is in danger. It's a war to expand the borders, those in those wars there may be exceptions as opposed to an milchemet mitzvah. So the Maimonides practically repeats what we found in the Mishnah. When do these exemptions apply? That these men are sent away from the battlefront, in milchemet reshut, but in a milchemet mitzvah, everyone goes out, even the groom from his chamber and the bride from the wedding canopy. So nobody can have an excuse when we're talking about a war where the very existence of the people can be in danger, where we're being attacked by the enemy, where even if there is no more 7 nations of the conquest and there is no more Amalek, but there still are those people who come, the enemies who come to destroy us, that would be considered a milchemet mitzvah, and everyone goes out, even the groom from his chamber and his bride from her wedding canopy. very clear how Maimonides codifies this law. Any comments until here? I can't see you all, so please, if somebody wants to comment. No? Okay. Now, I picked some sources about the value of human life. There,
I
what?
have
Yes,
a comment about that.
sure.
Well, I mean, that is then, but it's not, people are not following that today.
What are you talking about, the ultra-Orthodox yeshiva boys?
Yes, I mean, a lot of people, yes, on that, because
That's basically the problem that we have today, because they didn't want to serve in the war, even in the army, even before this war, but that became even more clear after the war, when they insist that they have to stay in the yeshiva and study. In a responsum that Rabbi Golinkin wrote last year about this subject, he shows how when Ben Gurion exempted yeshiva boys from going into the army, he was talking about 400 yeshiva boys, and today there are about 60,000 that are exempt.
yeah.
And the situation is really difficult, but you still hear some of the heads of yeshivot, when the students come and ask them, can we go to the army? And he says, no way, you're not allowed. Even if you go to jail, you're not allowed to go to the army. And a couple of months ago, the former chief Sephardi rabbi said, if we're forced to go into the army, we will all leave the country. I don't know if you recall that. So we still have these voices the whole time. Obviously, that
Well, there's a difference, because that's rabbinic, and that the other one is, this is Torah, and Torah law oversees rabbinic law.
no, first of all, we are interpreting the written Torah as the rabbis interpreted. We are not a religion of written Torah, but the oral law interprets the written Torah. And they already said that from the second source that we read that had exemptions, they said applies only to an optional war, not to a mandatory war. And a mandatory war where you need the forces to go out and fight to defend you from the enemy that wants to destroy you, there are no excuses, basically. If you are physically capable and if you're trained to go to war, you should be going to war.
Yeah, we're in the mandatory war.
We just said mandatory wars are either the war against the 7 nations that don't exist anymore from the second nations of the conquest, the war against Amalek. We speak about Amalek, but the original Amalek doesn't exist, but there may still be other peoples who are out to destroy us like Amalek. But the third category that Maimonides mentions is if somebody comes to attack us and the enemy wants to attack us. It's this one, a war fought to assist Israel from an enemy which attacks them, an enemy who wants to destroy us, and we have to defend ourselves. That is an enemy that we have an obligation to fight.
I agree.
Okay. The value of human life. Human life is very important, very sacred in Jewish law. There are biblical and rabbinic rulings that talk about this. They base themselves on biblical verses and expand what the meaning of this all is. The first point is that not getting involved is not an option. You can't say, oh, well, let them, they should just go and kill and so on, but I'm staying on the sidelines. I'm not getting involved. And they learn it directly from the verse in Leviticus. It's that famous chapter, the Kedoshim Tiyu, that talks about ethical obligations that we all have. And it says, you shall not stand by the blood of your fellow. You can't just see someone is about to be killed or hurt or whatever, and you say, oh, well, I'm not getting involved. No, you cannot just stand there and not get involved. You have an obligation to help out. And the rabbis learned it on the basis of that verse. They learned in the Babylonian Talmud Sanhedrin. Our rabbis taught Whence do we know that he who pursues after his fellow to slay him must be saved from sin at the cost of his own life? From the verse, you shall not stand by the blood of your fellow. So there are, if you see one person running after another person and wants to kill him, and the Talmud also talks about if someone wants to commit a sexual crime and another person, that's also would be an example of what is called rodef, a pursuer. And you can stop him, if you can't stop him by, for example, maiming him or some other thing, and there's no other way to stop him but to kill him, then you're allowed to kill him so that he cannot kill the other person. And at the same time, you are preventing him from committing a serious sin, which is killing somebody else. So life is very valuable, and nobody has the right to go and kill somebody else. We're not talking here about war. We're talking about other circumstances. Nobody who sees such a situation in which someone is running after somebody else, pursuing him, and is about to kill him, will say, oh no, I'm not getting involved. You know, the Torah says very clearly, you shall not stand by the blood of your fellow. And Maimonides codifies on that basis. Whenever a person can save another person's life, but he fails to do so, he transgresses the negative commandment, you shall not stand by the blood of your fellow. So you are not only being, you know, and not caring about your fellow in a personal manner, but it's considered transgressing a negative commandment. You can't just stand by and say, well, I'm not getting involved, I'm not doing nothing. You are not allowed to stand by the blood of your fellow. That's the first verse about very clearly prohibiting this kind of conduct. The second point I wanted to talk about is what's called Yeharegu Bal Yavor. There are certain things we will see now in the Talmud that one is supposed to prefer to die and not transgress them. But that doesn't mean that we can do it for in any circumstance. When is martyrdom allowed? Is it allowed at all, or is it a sacrilege? So the Talmud in Sanhedrin has a very detailed analysis of it. And Rabbi Yochanan, who was second generation Amora from the land of Israel, said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadiak, by a majority voice, it was resolved in the upper chambers of the house of Natzah and Lod, that in every other law of the Torah, if a man is commanded transgress and suffer not death, he may transgress and suffer death, except idolatry, incest, which includes adultery and murder. So there are only three major transgressions that one may not do, even if we are told, if you don't do this, we will kill you. We will later see that there are certain kind of exceptions, but on the whole, if you are told you either worship this idol, or commit incest or adultery, or murder someone, otherwise we will kill you, you are not allowed to do it, because that would be a major sacrilege, a major chilul Hashem. When Rabbi Dimi, who was one of the rabbis called Mechute, those are the rabbis who used to come down from Israel to Babylonia and bring to the academies in Babylonia the teachings from the land of Israel, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the same Amora, second generation sage from the Talmudic academies in Israel, he said, this was taught only if there is no royal decree. By this he means a decree by the king, by a foreign king of religious persecution or coercion. But if there was a royal decree, one must incur martyrdom rather than transgress even a minor precept. Then another one of the Nechute, another one of the famous Amoraim who came from the land of Israel to Babylonia, when Rabin came, he said in Rabbi Yochanan's name, even without a royal decree, it was only permitted in private. But in public, one must be martyred even for a minor precept rather than violate it. So there are two different versions of exactly what it is that Rabbi Yochanan said. And they ask, what is meant by a minor precept? Rabbi, son of Rabbi Isaac, said in Rav's name, even to change one's shoe strap. This sounds very strange, that what happens is that those days, Jews tied their sandals in a different way from the non-Jews, and therefore if you did that publicly, wore the Gentiles kind of shoe strap, it meant that you were in some way rejecting Judaism. And they said, and how many make it public? Rabbi Jacob said in the Rabbi Yochanan's name, the minimum for publicity is 10. The same as we later learned for a minyan, a minimum is 10. Also for martyrdom, a minimum is 10. And only in very, very extreme circumstances, when there is a foreign king who makes you do it in public, and we're talking about these extreme cases where they demand idolatry, incest, or murder, those are the only cases in which one actually prefers martyrdom to saving one's life. But in most other circumstances, and we'll see now other sources about it, you are told to preserve life and not to be martyred, because we're not a religion of martyrdom. These are very extreme circumstances in which you are demanded to do idolatry, incest, or murder. And otherwise, you are not allowed. And you will see now in the codes in Maimonides how he explains more in detail what you apply. He says all of the above distinctions apply only in times other than times of a decree. However, in times of a decree, when a wicked king like Nebuchadnezzar and his supporters will arise and issue a decree against the Jews to nullify their faith or one of the mitzvot, that is, in those extreme cases, one should sacrifice one's life rather than transgress any of the other mitzvot, whether one is merely compelled to transgress among 10 Jews or one is compelled to transgress amongst Gentiles. If any mode about whom it is said transgress and do not sacrifice your life, if we're talking about cases where there are not these three extreme cases, and the person sacrifices life and does not transgress, he is held accountable for his life. That is, Maimonides says you are not allowed to commit martyrdom if it is not for one of these extreme situations. But when anyone about whom it is said, sacrifice your life and do not transgress, if it is one of these cases of Yiharegu Bal Yavor, and the person sacrifices his life and does not transgress, then he sanctifies God's name. It's Kiddush Hashem. And if he does it in the presence of 10 Jews, he sanctifies God's name in public. So there is a very strong language about when you can sacrifice your life, only in very extreme situations. Usually it's in cases where it involves only these three major transgressions. And if you do it in other circumstances, then you're actually going against Jewish law. It is not a sanctification of God's name, but it is on the contrary. If you do it for other reasons, because we are not a religion that is in favor of martyrdom. It's only for very, very extreme situations. Another concept that appears in Jewish law is pikuach nefesh. Pikuach danger is danger to human life. Danger to human life sometimes can cause us to transgress certain laws. So which would be the circumstance? What would be their circumstances? When would transgressions be permissible? And one of the major verses that the rabbis use to discuss this issue is the verse in Leviticus that says, "You shall keep my laws and my rules, which if a man does, he shall live by them." V'chai b'hem. You're supposed to live by observing God's laws and God's rules, that is how It's supposed to enrich our lives. It's supposed to make us be connected with God and with our fellows. And when we observe these laws and these rules. And the Mishnah says, every potential danger to human life, what's called safek pikuach nefesh, overrides Shabbat. So even Shabbat would be set aside not only when there is danger for human life, but also when there is a potential danger, when we are afraid that a certain circumstances might be dangerous and might cost somebody their lives. Even Shabbat can be set aside in those circumstances. And the rabbis expound on this. And they say that if you have to do something that is that is not what you normally would do on Shabbat, this shouldn't be done only by a gentle or by a minor, but by prominent Jewish adults. So you don't say, oh, well, this is actually a transgression, so I'll call the goy or I'll ask a minor to do it. No, if there is something which is a danger or a potential danger to human life, even a prominent Jewish adult must do it, because life is more important, and we don't want to put life in danger, even if we have to transgress the Shabbat. So the rabbis wanted to understand on what basis do we learn this. And in the Talmud in Yomah, they tell us a story. It's much longer than what I brought you, because it's a whole folio practically, but I brought you a certain part. Rabbi Ishmael, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah were once on a journey with Levi, the net maker, and Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, following them. Then this question was asked of them. Whence do we know that in the case of danger to human life, the laws of the Sabbath are suspended? And they bring a whole bunch of sources where they try to learn it from, until Rabbi Yehuda brought a teaching in the name of Samuel. And he said, if I had been there, I should have told them something better than what they said, because they brought a whole bunch of other proof texts. If I would have been there, I would have told them the correct proof text is, he shall live by them, this source from Leviticus, that he shall not die because of them. That means we're supposed to observe the law so that we can live, and not so that we die, not so that we are martyrs. And there's another one of the rabbis said that you are allowed to transgress one Shabbat so that you can observe a lot of other Shabbatot. See, the highest value is preserving human life, and not the highest value observing the Shabbat or whatever other law, even if you die for it, because that is not that we are not a martyrdom religious. And what Rashi comments on another page about this this very same issue, as he says, when it says he shall live by them, but he shall not die because of them. Why does the rabbi say this? The reason is that the lives of Jews are dearer to God than the mitzvot. You know, the mitzvot are a way to serve God. They're a way for us to be better human beings and relate to other people, but they don't, except for very, very extreme situations, life is dearer than the observance of mitzvot. Any comments up to here? Because I can't see you all when I have this open. No? Okay. Another source in Eruvin is in the Babylonian Talmud. There is a saying in the name of Rav. Rav was first generation Babylonian Amora, and Rabbi Yehuda, who quotes him, was a student second generation Babylonian Amora. And he says, if Gentiles who besiege Jewish towns, as they put a siege around the city, one may not go out against them with weapons nor desecrate the Shabbat for them. That's the opinion of Rav. But then the rabbis discuss it and they ask, when does this apply? When they came for monetary matters, they came for economic reasons, they came because they wanted to steal, they came because they wanted to enrich themselves. But when they come for matters of life, one may go out against them with weapons and desecrate the Shabbat for them. And in a border town where you're closer to where the enemy lives, even if they come not for matters of life, but for matters of straw and stubble, one may go out against them with weapons and desecrate the Shabbat for them. If you recall, in the times of the Maccabees, at the beginning, they didn't want to go out and fight on Shabbat. And then they decided that when you have to protect life, you're allowed to go out and fight the Shabbat. And here they're going even further, and they're saying, we'll see in a minute how Maimonides codifies this, but they're saying that even if you are not sure that they're considering killing, but you think it's very dangerous and it might escalate to that, you can still go out and fight, even if it means desecrating the Shabbat. So, as always, halakha develops according to circumstances, as long as you take into account the sources and the rules of the system, and then you can apply it to new circumstances, even if up to that moment they would have preferred not to desecrate the Shabbat. And the Rambam codifies in the Mishnah Torah that the rules that we learned apply when Gentiles lay siege to Jewish city. And he says what we just saw, if their intent was financial gain, the Shabbat law should not be violated because of them, nor are we allowed to wage war against them. But if a city is located near the border, however, we should march against them with weapons and wage war, even when they are demanding hay or straw. But then he adds, it's a mitzvah upon every Jew who is able to come and go out and help their brethren under siege and to save them from the hands of Gentiles. And it's forbidden for them to delay it until after the Shabbat. So if we see that there is a real danger and we see that the non-Jews are coming and they're about to attack and the city is under siege and their lives can be in danger, and even if it's Shabbat, we don't wait and we don't say, oh, well, it's desecrating the Shabbos, maybe we shall wait till after Shabbat. Everybody who is able to come, this is like really relevant for what we were talking about, the yeshiva boys. If you have young yeshiva boys who are strong and capable and able to go out and defend other Jews who might have their life in danger, they have to do it. And even if it is on Shabbat, you are required to go out and fight and save them. Now here we have the circumstances are either that they even if they came for either they want to come to fight, or they want to they come for, or they're in the border, or they come and we're afraid that this might escalate into killing. So the interesting thing is the Shulchan Aruch adds, and this is the Ramah, the Ashkenazi gloss on the Shulchan Aruch by Rabbi Yosef Karo. He says this applies even if they haven't come, but they want to come. That is, we see the foreign army coming close to our border. They haven't crossed over yet. My association is when the Russians started moving towards Ukraine and they hadn't even entered Ukraine, but you could already see their intention. Then you can already go out and prepare for war. And it doesn't matter if it's Shabbat or if not, but you see that they're coming and they may kill. And in the next paragraph, they add, there is one who says that in our times, even if they come for money, we desecrate the Shabbat. You don't start thinking about, well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. Why? Because if we do not allow them to plunder the money, they will kill. And so it becomes a case of saving life. And then he adds, in any event, everything is according to the situation. This is based on Piskei Maharim, Rav Israel Isserlein from the Middle Ages, who said that even when they come just for money, we have to be willing to desecrate the Shabbat. We are allowed to desecrate the Shabbat because it's not really desecrating, because we're saving your life, because they're dangerous and we're afraid that they might come and kill. Okay, so this is even beyond what the Talmud said. That they said if they come, if they're already on the way, even if they have murderous intentions or not here, even if they haven't yet come, or even if we are not at all sure they have any intention to take lives, we already have to be ready and prepare ourselves and protect ourselves, because life comes before everything else, even before Shabbat. Now, these sources justify fighting on Shabbat and desecrating the Shabbat because on the basis of the possible danger to life. But there are other sources who say we don't even need this justification. And so I was asked, is it necessary to invoke pikuach nefesh to fight on Shabbat? Some rabbis use other sources to prove that is possible. So there is one verse in the book of Deuteronomy that talks about when you go and fight and you're allowed to destroy trees, but not trees that grow fruits. If you want to use the trees to construct siege works around the city. So the verse says only trees that you know do not yield food, that have no fruit, may be destroyed. You may cut them down for constructing siege works against the city that is waging war with you, until it has been reduced. The Hebrew is ad ridta, or until it has been destroyed. So you can destroy the trees that surround that city. And it's very common in the comments by the rabbis that if they feel that some words don't have a clear reason to be included in that verse, then they must come to teach us something else. Why does it say until it has been reduced? It says that you're allowed to wage a war. If you are allowed to wage a war, you are obviously allowed to do whatever is necessary to protect yourself. So why does the verse say until it has been reduced? So the rabbis taught in the Talmud, in the Babylonian Talmud Shabbat, the rabbis taught Gentile cities must not be besieged less than 3 days before the Shabbat. Yet once they commence, when they started fighting, they need not lead off. And that's the Shammai said. Shammai and Hillel, the two early sages before Tanaitic times, he said, until it has been reduced, even on the Shabbat. So according to somebody's, okay. So according to this, we have another source that allows us to fight on Shabbat, even if not only because of pikuach nefesh. Yeah, because the verse has extra words that have no immediate need to be there. Another point that I thought was interesting that Rabbi Golinkin did not mention in his tshuva is how we must be careful and not rely on miracles. We hear very often that the rabbis, some of the ultra-Orthodox think that they can rely on miracles, and that the people who study do not require any kind of protection, because the protection comes from heaven. And yet the Talmud says in many different parts, very different places, it says that we cannot rely on miracles. So in the Talmud in Shabbat says, a man should never stand in a place of danger and say that a miracle be wrought for him, lest it is not. Of course, we can always pray, we can always hope that God will help us, but we always have to be careful to begin with. We always have to be protect our own lives and not go to dangerous places and not stand in dangerous places and not take risks that are unnecessary and not say, oh well, if it was meant to happen, it will happen, and if God wants to, He will protect me. There is a place where Maimonides writes that just like we say, okay, I won't eat and nothing will happen. No, you have to eat so you don't starve. Or I won't take a medicine and and if God wants to, I'll be cured or I'll be healthy. No, you have to take your medicine and you have to obey your doctor. In the same way, you don't say, okay, I'll do whatever dangerous thing I feel like it, and a miracle from heaven will help me. So first you do whatever you can, and then you can hope that your prayers will help and God will help you as well. And also this would apply also in obviously would apply in a war. You wouldn't say, oh well, if God wants to, we'll be okay. First you have to fight the war. A very interesting principle that appears in the Talmud in Chulin, and which is used in very different contexts, is a page on Chulin that talks about all kinds of prohibitions, things that are not allowed because they could be dangerous. And at the end of it, the Talmud summarizes, this therefore proves that regulations concerning danger to life are more stringent than ritual prohibitions. We can be stringent with ritual prohibitions. We all know about glatt kosher and being super extra strict. But there's kosher, you're not required glatt kosher. And you don't have to go much further than what the law requires. But when it comes to being careful about your life and taking care of your life and not put yourself in dangers, there you have to be even more severe, more stringent, and more careful. Because also, if you don't take care of your own life, you won't be able to observe the ritual prohibitions either. So, Hamira sakanta mi isura is in Hebrew. Danger, you have to be more strict about than a ritual prohibition. And based on this principle, the Rema, who's Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, who is the Ashkenazi glosses to the Shulchan Aruch of Yosef Karo, he says, he has also a whole list of things that are forbidden. And then he says, similarly, any person should be careful of all things that cause danger, because regulations concerning danger to life are more stringent than ritual prohibitions and isur. And one should be careful with an uncertain danger, even if you're not sure that there is a danger, than with an uncertain isur. You're not sure something is forbidden or not, and ritually, it's much worse if you suspect that something can be a danger to your life, and so you should be much more strict when there is a danger to your life. And all of these things are because of the danger. And a person who guards his soul, he's careful about his own life, will distance himself from them, and is prohibited to rely on a miracle or place one life in danger in all of these matters. So we have to do everything in our own power to try and prevent something that is dangerous. We can always pray, we can always hope for a miracle, we can hope for help from danger, but first you have to do whatever is in your power, and nobody can say, oh well, I'll just sit around and I'll study and let somebody else take care of it because I am not required to do this. We already saw that the very early sources already said that when it's a real danger and when enemies are coming to want to destroy us, etc., then everyone has the obligation to go and participate in defending. I see that there's some chats here, and I didn't see that during the. Oh, okay. Okay, I think most of what is asked here, I answered as I went on. Is there any other comments that you want to make?
Rabbi, I'd like to ask something. What happens if, I mean, who determines if it's a compulsory war or a war of choice? For example, now we're in this terrible situation about, is the war going to continue or not continue? What happens if many, many people feel that it's turning from a necessary war, milchemet mitzvah, to a war of choice? What happens then?
Look, some of them write, some of the poskim write that nowadays that you don't have a king, so the government or the army or whatever are the ones who lead us to war. We're in a very difficult situation now because the country is really split in the middle practically about what comes first, whether the
Hostages.
The hostages or winning the war, whatever.
We're still waiting for a definition of that. Yes.
No, there is a point of interpretation. There always is a certain possibility of interpretation. I don't know. I can give my own personal opinion, but it's very hard to say. I mean, some people say that if we let out all of these terrorists, we're inviting another war like this and another possibility for them to do this over again. So it's very hard to prove it one way or another. On the other hand, Maimonides, among others, wrote that there is no greater mitzvah than saving hostages. And we know that every day that passes, more of them die. So I don't have you have different opinions about it. It's hard to say which is the true opinion. Ellie?
I'm wondering how we then get away, well, how the Haredim get away with saying that their sons should study in yeshiva and not go to war when
Because
there's
has a very long precedent. Ben Gurion already freed them from, said that those that study full time don't have to serve in the army, and it just grew and grew, and it's more of them every year. That already when the state was founded, Ben Gurion allowed some of them to stay studying. And maybe if you would just take the very brightest and best one of them and let like 200 to 400 people study all the time, we could tolerate it. But we're talking now of over 60,000 people who don't serve in the army in the Haredi world, and that makes it much more difficult.
Right, and get
especially
more
now when we have
money.
over 800 soldiers who already were killed in the war.
Yeah, and when my daughter was in the IDF, she did not love guard duty to guard the settlements. When the sons of those who living in the settlements weren't going to the IDF.
Yeah, well, you can't really generalize. It's not everyone who's doing those things, but it's very hard to accept that people go and destroy olive trees, kill people, or hurt people, or burn cars or whatever, because they consider that all Palestinians are Hamas and you can kill all of them. I think that if we value human life, we have to value non-Jewish life as well. Of course, if they're terrorists, it's another story.
Right.
But if they're just civilians whom you have no reason to suspect they're involved in violence, we have to be much more careful. There's now case going on in court against the 5 reservists who tortured one of the terrorists in Sde Teiman at the beginning of the war. And there are more of those cases, maybe probably not as many, as what the Arabs did, what the Palestinians did, but we shouldn't tolerate that either, because a human life is a human life, and if they're not involved in violence, it shouldn't be allowed to be able to take it out on them. Because that's not the ethics that our religion teaches us. Rabbi Golinkin in his teshuva also included the fact that some of the decisors consider living in the land of Israel and even the conquering land around Israel or in Israel is a separate mitzvah. Not all of the decisors think like that. So he considered that one of the reasons why we might require everybody to serve in the army, because if it's a mitzvah, a separate mitzvah, not only part of the whole Torah teaching, then maybe it's even a stronger reason to require everyone to serve in the army. I didn't think, that's important, but I didn't think it was the main reason. Any other comments? So we have now in a few minutes the closing section where Rakefet Ginsburg, the CEO of the Masorti movement, is going to be talking. And I hope you join us there. You have the link in your emails, and we'll all meet there, and then we'll wait for Rakefet to give us the closing words, okay? So,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Rabbi Diana. Excelente clase, gracias.
Gracias, Diana. Nos hablamos.
Thank you very much. Yes, excellent. Yes.
Thank you. Anybody who wants the sources can write me an email or ask Schechter or send to Schechter and ask for me to send them their email, okay? The sources. Bye.